That's a very, very hard question. My answer will shock people, and they won't be the answer they expected, and it's the mantids, or the mantis, and that will really surprise and shock people. Researchers refer to them as mantids. So it's green, it's got very huge eyes, 2 tiny little holes for a nose, a very thin slit mouth, and it actually enters my mind through my eyes. It sends a message which I feel going down my optic nerve into my brain, and it says, I'm your real mother. I am your real mother. I am your more important mother.
Well, if you think of everything as energy, all we do as a soul is a lump of energy, basically, which is humanoid in form. So the basic form of the soul is human. And that applies to pretty much every race throughout the universe. Much as it's interesting to think of perhaps there's insect, higher life out there, they don't exist, not in terms of the consciousness potential of let's say, a human being.
That's not true.
The 14 faction and the energy patterns that they brought with them are where this concept of the reptilian races came from, because that was the appearance of the 14 faction. Although we were protected as much as we possibly could be from the 14 faction, the closest they came to us was about 93 galaxies distant, I think, something like that. So they never really came that close to our galaxy or our solar system.
Our special guest tonight is Chris Thomas. He's returning to speak with us from the UK about actually Wales, and he has some more information he'd like to share with us, which I'm very grateful to hear. Chris, welcome back to the program. How are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you, Robert. Nice to be back. Thanks for asking me back on.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Now, what you had sent me in an email was fascinating about the 14th faction, but I think we need to give people some context as to what that means exactly.
Yeah, sure. It's actually a bit of a strange subject. I know the whole thing of the aliens and alien races is a strange enough subject to start with. But the 14th faction is a little bit out there, just a little bit further out there, I think. But it's certainly something that the Akashic has recorded very clearly, and it's had a major impact on the universe as a whole, but it's also particularly had an impact on Earth and events that have occurred on Earth. And this certainly is, as far as I can track, is the origin of this concept of there being reptilian races. Everybody seems to have latched on to, for several years now, that there's reptilians everywhere, reptilians controlling everything. The Queen Mother was a reptilian, wasn't it? Somebody said.
Yeah, that's David Icke or somebody I think was talking about.
David Icke, yeah. So there's an awful lot of confusion around about alien races, who exists within the universe, if they've had any interaction with events on Earth or people on Earth. And so what I wanted to do is to try and clarify a lot of the disinformation that's out there and misinformation that's out there and how people think of things. But the 14th faction is something that, as I say, is a little bit even further out there, but it's quite an important aspect of all of this alien material. People keep coming up to me and they're saying, I was told that I'm a reptilian Draco hybrid, or something along those lines, and you sort of think, well, where on earth does something like that come from? And if you start researching into UFO races or alien races, what you end up with is there's got to be 10, 15,000 different races listed out there if you talk to people. It's a phenomenal number, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Most of that is totally disinformation and is channeled material that's come from the race we were talking about last time about the Velon. Deliberately intended to mislead people. And so a huge amount of this information is just literally that. It's intended to mislead, cause problems, cause difficulties for people on Earth because of the kind of agenda that the Velon have. But when it comes to this reptilian thing, it seems to be a core thing that's been running through for many years now. And in fairness, there is a certain truth to it. But it's not what most people seem to think and how they understand it. So, if we start from the beginning, shall we say, the universe we inhabit is not the only universe that exists. I'm not talking about multiverses of the sort of cosmologist or the quantum physicists' way of talking. They don't really exist. But what I mean is the physical universes that do exist. So if you think of our universe as exploring a thought, a sort of what if, so you have this creationary source rolling around whatever space he's in, going, what will happen if I did this? And that's what the universe is set up to do. It's literally, it's an energy envelope that allows that thought to be explored. And our universe is essentially exploring the concept of freedom of choice. So every soul that exists within this universe is created with that ability to freely choose their actions. There is only one universal law, as it were, which is that you cannot act in such a way as to remove somebody else's freedom to choose. So essentially everything is allowable as long as you don't break that one rule. But as I say, there are other universes, and the universe near to ours explores the exact opposite. What if every soul that exists within our universe has the ability to remove freedom of choice? How does that work? It doesn't work very well, as it turns out. From what I can find out about it, the universe is in a state of collapse because it's finished. Essentially, it just is imploding in on itself. But some time ago, the beings who exist within that universe, some of them, found a way of breaking into our universe by constructing what physicists would, or cosmologists would call a wormhole, which is theoretically a back-to-back black hole. So it's essentially a two-way tube that connects two regions of space together. So what these beings managed to do was to create a wormhole into our universe to try and obtain as much energy as possible from our universe to maintain their position in their universe, which they knew was beginning its state of collapse. And that's what they did, was to break into this universe. Now, when that wormhole opened, a certain number of souls who were on their way to Earth to take on human form, as it were, got caught in the blast. And basically they were contaminated by the energy patterns of that other universe. So into a universe that is built around energy patterns of freedom of choice, these souls, there's 33,000 of them altogether on the way to Earth, got caught in this blast, which allowed them to take freedom of choice away, which is not very good when it comes to a universe of freedom of choice. Now, because it's a universe of freedom of choice, these 33,000 had a choice of whether they made use of those energy patterns or not. And most of them didn't. I'm glad to say, had some even bigger problems than we have now. But so only a few of them did. And most of them didn't come to Earth in any way for a very long time. Nobody knows where they went. Once they got caught in this blast, they seemed to disappear for a while and go somewhere. And it's proven impossible to track down precisely where they went. So the first signs we ever saw of it on Earth was with Alexander the Great. He was the first person ever to conquer, if you like. If you look through human history, proper human history, I don't mean the rubbish that we get told in school, the way we lived was we lived in sort of tribal society, shall we say, family societies, I suppose, extended families, like clans, if you like. That was then a clan village, and the clan had a territory which had its resources for growing food and hunting and water supplies and everything. We very rarely had any conflict between the two neighbouring clans, because each of them was aware of the resources that they had, and going around killing people was not part of their culture. If you look back into the kind of cultures we had then you're looking at, as I say, if you did something against the tribal rules, then you were made to work for the society, for the family, for a certain period of time. So almost a period of imprisonment, as it were. But instead of putting you away somewhere, you were forced to work on the clan's behalf. But your family didn't suffer. There were always communal stores and communal supplies, so that your family was always fed and looked after. It was just the person who caused the problem that was punished for it. So that's the kind of culture that there was. And all of a sudden into that came Alexander the Great, who all of a sudden decided what he was going to do was to start conquering half the planet, or as much of the planet as you could get hold of. So that was in about 320 BC, I think so it was, from what I remember. So he started trying to take over massive areas of the planet so that he could control everything that occurred. And that really was the first time in human history that we had seen somebody with that kind of intention, using energy patterns that literally were alien to life on Earth. And then following that, of course, we had the Roman Empire, because they basically followed Alexander the Great's pattern. And then you have essentially the Vatican, who's been doing the same thing for the last 1,500 years, trying to control everybody on the planet. And then you have things like the European monarchs taking over territories and into territorial wars and all that sort of stuff. All kinds of people using an ability to remove freedom of choice, because obviously if you're going around killing people, you're not allowing to choose how their life is. Well, that's really how it began. But the real change we started to see on the planet more than anything else was in the mid to late 1760s with the Industrial Revolution. So if you think what the 14th faction came into this universe to do was to strip as much of the resources of this universe as possible, take it back to their universe and use the energy patterns to maintain their position within their universe. So if you look at the Industrial Revolution, what you have is all of a sudden it's the first time that humans turned on the Earth. Up until that point, we only used what was available to us. There was nothing on a mass scale. There was no mass destruction, no mass manufacturing, or anything like that. Only the start of the Industrial Revolution, and say around about the mid-1700s, where the whole attitude on the planet changed, or at least the attitude within the industrialists changed. And so it's the people behind the Industrial Revolution who were the ones who started to make full use of this bizarre energy that the 14th faction brought in with it. So these souls who got caught in the blast, as it were, became contaminated by the energy patterns that the 14th faction brought with them.
You know, in what you wrote to me in your most recent email, you said that the black holes were collapsing.
Yep.
And why is that?
Right. Okay. Well, this comes down to the 14th faction, the way in which they functioned. They broke into this universe to obtain as much energy from our universe as they could possibly take. Now, in order to do that, they brought with them, I can only describe as implosion devices. These are strange-looking things. They've never been seen before within this universe. Nobody's ever developed anything like them. Some of them are quite large. I mean, the ones free floating in space were several hundred feet long, several hundred yards long, something like that. And what they were was an energy shell which contained nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. So, you're looking at a state of nothing. There were no energy patterns within this device, just an energy shell. So if somebody approached one of these shells to find out what it was, it would implode. And what it did was to use the energy of that soul. So it would literally destroy that soul. And in doing so would create a black hole. Because black holes did not exist within this universe before these other beings turned up. And that was a good one to get your head around that one. When you think of how scientists describe black holes, and they've been talking recently about every single cell inside the human body is a black hole in the center of it and all this sort of stuff. No, not really. But if you go back to Stephen Hawking's work, for example, on black holes, which is how he made his name in science, he described them quite well in saying they're basically hollow tubes. And what they do, the way Einstein worked with them as well, so he was the first one to work with black holes, I think. And with his time-space theories, or space-time theories, that basically a black hole was a collapsed star that attracted into it, because its gravitational pull was so huge, that it attracted into it anything that was within its range. So any of the star matter, material, energy patterns, whatever it was that were within its range, got sucked into this black hole and chucked out somewhere else. Except nobody ever identified where the somewhere else was. But what these black holes actually did was to do exactly that. It drew as much energy as it possibly could into itself and discharged it at a point, a collection point, if you like, where the 14th faction could make use of them and transport it back to their universe.
So it is a hole, a wormhole from this universe to the other universe, so that they can drain energy out like a parasite. They're just sucking energy, specific types of energy out. But okay, so now when did the collapse start to occur, and why did that happen?
Well, obviously having this bizarre race turn up in our universe, bringing with them energies that are the exact opposite of the energies that this universe is made from, was not a good idea as far as this universe was concerned. And really nobody had an answer to it. There was no way of fighting them because all they had to do was say no, because they could remove freedom of choice. And so it took a long time to work out a way of dealing with them and the problems that they brought with them. Into this, I'm afraid, comes time, and time is pretty bizarre stuff. Now, I can't really explain all the connections in terms of time sequences because there just doesn't seem to be a way of unwrapping them. For example, when the wormhole was first created into our universe, that was 3.5 million years ago. But at the same time, to protect our solar system, because there's something very, very special about our solar system. The universe, as it were, shut off any access into our solar system to prevent the 14th faction from gaining access to it. And that happened in human terms, in human history terms, that occurred 8,000 years ago. So somehow or other, events on Earth happening 8,000 years ago relate to an event occurring within the universe 3.5 million years ago. So if you can find a way of explaining that one, I really would like to know, because I haven't been able to get to the bottom of that.
I need to cogitate on that for a moment, Chris.
Well, I've been trying to work that one out for quite a few years, and I really can't. I mean, you can explain it to a certain extent, because in order for us to be physical, and the planets we live on to be physical within our solar system, then energy patterns are highly condensed. And we see light traveling at 186,000 miles per second. But once you get outside of our solar system, then the energy patterns are not as condensed as they are with us. So light travels at much, much faster speeds. And therefore time exists at different levels and in different forms within different regions of the universe, depending on how the energy patterns within that region work. So events that occur on Earth that, say, take 100 years as far as we're concerned, can, for the semi-physical races, take 1,000 years. But for the non-physical races, it can take 1,000,000 years. So in relation to each other, a million-year event within the realms of the non-physical races would, as far as we're concerned, or they would experience it as being something like 100 years here on Earth. So they experience time in some respects much faster than we experience it, but at the same time, because they're effectively immortal, or at least they will last as long as this universe lasts, then to them time also happens much more slowly.
to share too. And that is an experience that happened to me personally in this lifetime, just a very few years ago. I had already been doing a few years of regression work with experiences of extraterrestrial contact, including experience with some reptilian contacts. And one day, having done some appointments or whatever, I was just walking through the living room in my house, and suddenly, pop, right in front of me, to my enormous surprise, was a reptilian being. He was a little bit taller than I. Now, normally in this life, if I'd seen a reptile of any kind, even a little one, in my living room, I would have been really freaked out. I'm not very comfortable with reptilian beings. But anyway, with this experience, conscious, awake experience, I saw this reptilian being standing in my living room. I went right over to him, extended my hand, held his hand, looked into these beautiful, I thought they were beautiful, golden colored eyes with a little vertical eyeball, little pupil, kind of a lightning strike. And that's all that I remember consciously. But a few weeks later, I had a past life therapy colleague of mine do a regression on me to see if there was anything more to that experience. And to make a long story short, in the few minutes that that reptilian being was there, he said to me telepathically as we continued to hold hands, and I can still remember the feeling, the physical feeling of that hand, thick and strong and not creepy. I was surprised it wasn't creepy. And he reassured me that he is an ambassador from somewhere else, an ambassador representing many, many different extraterrestrial beings who come and interact with human beings. And he was here to tell me, as somebody who regresses people to these experiencers, and sometimes because of my growing up in my conditioned mind, I wonder, could this really, really, really be true? It certainly seems as if it is. But he wanted to reassure me, for the sake of all those different species who come here, that yes, indeed, they do really exist. They do come here. They come here very quickly into our awareness, and they pop out. They disappear from our awareness very quickly, and that it is a very meaningful phenomenon, and that we have no idea how important we are, that's you and me, all of us, are to them.